Hey, welcome back, friend. Settle in now, and let this be the moment when you stop carrying the day so tightly. Let your blanket find its place around you, whether it is pulled all the way to your chin or simply resting across your lap. Let your shoulders drop a little, then a little more. Unclench the jaw you may not have noticed you were holding shut. Let the small muscles around your eyes soften. Smooth out the forehead. Breathe in slowly, and do not try to make it a perfect breath. Just let it be a real one. Then another. Feel the bed, or the chair, or the couch beneath you, doing its quiet work, holding you without needing thanks, holding you without complaint. If one hand is colder than the other, let it warm. If your feet are searching for a comfortable angle, let them find it. Nothing urgent now, nothing to solve in this moment, just breath and blanket and the slow untying of all the little knots a day can leave inside a body. And tonight, as your breathing settles and the mind loosens its grip a little, I want to ask you something strange. When the Aztec world woke before sunrise, what sound truly began the day? The obvious answer, the answer most people reach for first, is ceremony, temple drums, priests climbing steep steps, conch shells calling through the half-dark, maybe even the harsh, unforgettable theater of empire itself, all grandeur and power and fear. That is the image many of us inherit, isn't it? Stone pyramids, painted gods, incense, warriors, sacrifice, spectacle. It is not entirely wrong, but it is not the first sound. The deeper answer is smaller, closer, and far more human. It is the scraping hush of stone on stone. It is the wet press of maize becoming dough. It is the pat-pat of hands shaping tortillas in the dark before dawn. The Aztec morning, in the great island capital of Tenochtitlan, and in the towns and villages around Lake Texcoco, began not only with rulers and rituals but with women, bent over metates, coaxing breakfast, lunch, endurance, and tomorrow itself out of soaked corn. History is often a room before sunrise, where love sounds exactly like work. We are wandering tonight through the world of the Mexica, the people many of us call the Aztecs, especially in the 15th and early 16th centuries, from roughly 1428, when the Triple Alliance made them the dominant power in central Mexico, to 1521, when Tenochtitlan fell to the Spanish and their indigenous allies. The city itself had been founded in 1325 on an island in Lake Texcoco, and by the early 1500s, it may have held 200,000 people or more, linked by causeways, canals, markets, shrines, courtyards, kitchens, gardens, and the fragile miracle of daily labor. Across the wider empire, millions lived under tribute and obligation, but also under sky and season and hunger and habit, all the ordinary forces that press upon human beings in every age. So before we narrow our gaze to one courtyard, one hearth, one pair of hands, let us stand for a moment in the world that held them. The Valley of Mexico, high and cool in the early hours, nearly 2,200 meters above sea level, water reflecting what little light existed before the sun itself arrived, reed beds whispering, canoes shifting against wooden posts, white breath in the air on some mornings. The distant smell of mud, lake water, smoke, and flowers braided together, temples rising above neighborhoods, dogs stirring, turkeys rustling, somewhere a sleeping child turning on a woven mat, somewhere an old woman already awake, somewhere the faint resin of copal, somewhere the sour lime scent of maize prepared overnight. Civilizations often look hardest at their monuments, but their truth lives in their mornings. And if you find yourself enjoying this gentle wandering through the dark before daybreak, you can leave a quiet like, subscribe if you feel like returning, and, if you want, comment with where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. I always love imagining these stories moving softly across different rooms, different countries, different midnight hours. For now, though, let your breathing go even slower, because long before the first gold touched the lake, a woman was already leaning over stone, and an empire was waiting inside her hands. Let us step into a common household in Tenochtitlan around the year 1485. Not a palace, not a temple, just a home with a packed earth floor, reed mats, a low hearth, a few clay vessels, a basket or two, a sleeping child who will wake hungry. Let us imagine a young woman we might call Shoko, not because the records preserve her, but because thousands like her must have existed, and history is fuller when we allow room for the unnamed. Shoko wakes before the sky changes color. Perhaps there is still a star or two visible over the dark outline of roofs and temple platforms. The room is cool. Her knees know the floor before her eyes know the light. She does not begin with drama. She begins with maize. The kernels were steeped in lime water overnight, the alkaline bath loosening their hulls in a process we now call nixtamalization. Useful word that. Scientific, almost clinical. But the older Nahuatl world knew the intimacy of it better than the laboratory ever could. The ground corn would become nourishment of astonishing efficiency, more digestible, richer in available nutrients, capable of sustaining enormous populations. The empire rested on maize, yes, but it rested just as surely on the body that transformed maize into food before anyone else had fully woken. Up to 6 hours a day, some sources suggest, could vanish into this work in rural settings, even centuries later. Can you imagine giving that much of every day to the simple prevention of hunger? Can you imagine how strong your shoulders would become, and how tired? In Nahuatl, the grinding stone was metlatl, which slipped into Spanish as metate. The word feels earthy in the mouth, steady, flat, practical, metlatl. There is no grandeur in it, and that is part of its power. The tools that keep people alive are often linguistically plain, almost shy. Zoko leans over hers now, guiding the stone roller forward and back, forward and back. A faint grit hums under pressure. Stone answers stone. The sound is so ordinary it becomes invisible, yet this may be the first music a child hears at dawn. Not hymn, not proclamation, friction, persistence, breakfast approaching. The room smells of damp maize, ash, clay, and whatever smoke lingered from the evening before. If there is a small fire, it gives more glow than heat at first. Her fingers grow slick with dough. The masa is cool and soft, grainy, and alive with effort. Nearby stands the komel, the clay griddle, often about a foot across, waiting. Later the tortillas, tlaxcali in Nahuatl, will puff and spot and dry if ignored too long. Freshness mattered. Tortillas could turn stale within hours, which meant they had to be made again and again, meal after meal, day after day. There is something almost merciless in that rhythm. Food that cannot wait reminds you that care must keep renewing itself. Maybe Choco glances at a daughter old enough to learn. In the Codex Mendoza, mothers teach girls these arts early, and one old observation noted that a girl who could grind corn and make atole was considered marriageable. There is tenderness in that, and pressure too. Competence could determine survival, respectability, future, rhythm, place. A 3-year-old child might receive half a tortilla in a daily ration. By age 5, 1 whole tortilla. By 13, 2 a day. Simple numbers, but aren't numbers sometimes just hunger wearing a neat little coat? When the dough is ready, Shoko pats it into rounds. Pat, 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 pat. That soft sound, so domestic, so nearly trivial, may once have traveled through whole neighborhoods before sunrise. Perhaps it mingled with a baby fussing, a dog shaking itself awake, a broom whispering over a courtyard. Perhaps a husband or father was not yet awake, or perhaps he was dressing for work, war duty, canal labor, tribute transport, field work in the Chinampas. But even then, notice this, whatever public labor men performed, it reached the day already fed by someone else's private labor. Civilization often hides its tenderness inside someone else's fatigue, and the taste of the morning, when it finally arrives, is not elaborate. A bowl of atole, what we call atole, a warm maize drink or porridge, sometimes sweetened with honey, sometimes seasoned with pimento. Simple as that, no breakfast spread in the modern sense. In some accounts, the first real meal came later, around mid-morning or even closer to 10, after hours of work. Imagine the steam rising into cool air. Imagine the first swallow coating the mouth, thick and mild and steadying. Think about that next time you wrap both hands around your own morning coffee or tea, as though heat itself were permission to begin. Soko may also sweep, fetch water, rinse cooking tools, tend a turkey, hush a child, check on a small kitchen garden, gather fuel, repair a garment, all before the sun is properly up. Among commoner women, these tasks braided together so tightly that one could hardly say where one ended and another began. A morning was not a list, it was a tide. Here a basket, there a pot, here a child, there a spindle, here a tortilla, there a breath. Have you ever noticed how the most necessary work rarely announces itself? Have you ever seen how the world keeps its loudest gratitude for the least visible labor? There is poetry, too, in the repetition, though the body paying the cost may not have called it that. Forward and back, press and turn, pat and lift, lay it on the commel, watch the edge, turn it, warm the next bowl, call softly to the child. The motions repeat until repetition becomes memory, and memory becomes culture. This is how entire peoples survive themselves, not only through victories and dynasties, but through the choreography of hands that learn what hunger requires and do it again tomorrow. The thing that strikes me most in these kitchens is how near necessity sits to reverence. Maize was not merely food. It was sacred, storied, tied to identity itself. Some traditions even described women gently blowing on maize before placing it in the pot so it would not fear the fire. Whether every household did this matters less than the emotional truth it reveals. To feed a family is to touch what is alive and ask it to become part of you. There is almost no more intimate exchange in human history. And so the first light has still barely begun, and already Shoko has bent her back over the metlatl, shaped the tlaxcali, warmed the atoli, and nudged another day into being. If you listen closely, the stone does not sound only like labor. It sounds like time itself being ground fine enough to swallow, and before that sound fully fades, steam is already rising in another darkened room. Let us drift now toward a different kind of dawn, one edged not with griddle heat alone, but with breath, herbs, fear, and the low roof of a steam bath. Let us imagine a first-time mother we might call Malinal in Tenochtitlan around 1507, the year of the new fire ceremony, when cosmic renewal mattered intensely and the vulnerability of bodies was never far from anyone's thoughts. Perhaps Malinal is not yet in labor, or perhaps the tightening has already begun in the small hours before sunrise. Beside her is a midwife, a Tlamatl, one of those practical, formidable women who moved between the sacred and the intimate with astonishing steadiness. Tlamatl is not a small word, it has weight. You can feel, even without mastering its grammar, that this is a role carrying skill, authority, memory. The midwife in Mexica society was not merely someone summoned at the last minute. She monitored pregnancies, advised diet, examined the body, stayed in the home, prepared the birthing room, cleaned, soothed, corrected, sometimes turned a baby in the womb by pressing on the belly. Can you imagine placing your trust in hands like that? Hands that knew your fear without needing you to explain it. Can you imagine the relief when another woman enters the room, and the room itself seems to breathe more wisely? Outside the home, or attached to it, the temazcal waits. The Spanish word temazcal comes from the Nahuatl temazcali, usually understood as a steam house, from cali, house, and the older root that gives us the heat and vapor of bathing. Even the word feels enclosed, warm, womb-like. The temazcal was low-roofed, intimate, holding smoke-free firewood heat and aromatic plants. Malinal is led there perhaps before dawn, the air outside cool against her face, the packed earth damp underfoot. Inside, the heat wraps around her like an invisible blanket. Herbs release sharp, green, medicinal scents. Moisture beads on the upper lip. Hair clings to skin. The ear hears drips, shifting stones, the small crackle of careful fire. Breath deepens whether one wants it to or not. The Aztecs believed childbirth unfolded under divine supervision, but their care was strikingly practical too. Advice included avoiding excessive weight, sorrow, anger, shocking surprises. Baths not too hot, continued sexual relations until the 7th month in some recorded recommendations, lest abstinence weaken the child. There is something so recognizable in that mixture of cosmology and plain advice, isn't there? People in every age search for causes when life feels fragile. We build rituals around uncertainty, because uncertainty is hard to hold with bare hands. When the pains sharpen, the midwife may offer herbal preparations. One source mentions sihuapatli, a plant used to help move labor along. Another records, with unsettling calm, the use of half a finger of tlacuatzin tail, opossum tail, in difficult births. Grotesque to modern ears maybe, But ancient medicine everywhere is full of substances that sound impossible until you remember how desperate human beings become in the face of pain. Medicine is often hope before it is certainty, and then the room grows serious. Malinal squats, as many women did, with the midwife behind her holding her heels so gravity can help. Sweat cools quickly where the steam does not touch. Her mouth tastes metallic with effort. The muscles of the thighs shake. Perhaps there is a murmur of prayer, or perhaps there is only instruction. Breathe, now, again. Human suffering is oldest when it is shared by witness. The Aztecs honored women who died in childbirth as warriors fallen in combat. That belief carries beauty and burden both. It dignifies what the body endures, but it also reveals how deadly labor could be. And here is the detail that startles, the one that reminds you, history was never soft simply because we tell it softly. Tonight, if a fetus died in the womb and had to be removed, one account says the midwife used an itztli, a stone knife, cutting the dead body apart inside the mother to save her life. It is a grisly image. There is no need to linger cruelly over it, but we should not look away from what women and the women who cared for them had to face. Calm narration does not mean false gentleness. Sometimes the deepest respect is simply to say, yes, it was this hard. After birth came more care. The mother returned to the temescal to sweat out what were understood as toxins. Resins and aromatic plants could be used to relax her and encourage milk. The midwife stayed on, sometimes for 4 days, monitoring supply, because children might nurse until age 2 or beyond, and there were no domestic milk animals to substitute. The placenta could be buried in a corner of the home. If the newborn was a girl, her umbilical cord might be buried near the hearth, a symbolic tying of future identity to household life. At her birth, symbols such as a basket, broom, and spindle could stand beside her, tiny prophecies laid out in plain objects. Is that not how societies write upon the body before the body can speak? Is that not how expectation often arrives disguised as tradition? And yet even here, in all this structure, there is tenderness. The baby washed for Chalchiutlique, goddess of waters, to cleanse the heart. The room cleaned thoroughly. The mother's hair attended to, the warm bath, the staying on, the watching, the practical devotion of being present. Think of that next time you see a prenatal checklist on a modern phone, or hear the reassuring voice of a nurse, or stand under hot water when the world feels too sharp. Distance in centuries does not erase recognition. Care is one of the oldest human technologies. If Shoko's mourning showed us how hunger was managed, Malinal's shows us how fragility was accompanied. Dawn in the Aztec world was not merely productive. It was supervisory, ceremonial, bodily, female, in ways that scholarship is still learning to see clearly enough. History likes its public squares, but life is usually decided in smaller rooms. A bowl, a bath, a hand on the belly, a whisper when the pain rises. What stays with us across time is not always who ruled. Often, it is who remained. And when the steam thins, and the air outside feels almost cold enough to cut, and the eastern sky has only just begun to think about color, another woman is already lifting a basket strap to her forehead and stepping toward the causeway, because before the market can murmur, someone has to carry the morning there. And so we move, slowly, into the waking arteries of the city, toward Tlatelolco, sister city and commercial heart, where trade gathered with such intensity that witnesses spoke of it with awe. Let us imagine an older woman we might call Teyakapan, sturdy in the knees, accustomed to wait, leaving home while the light is still undecided. In her bundle may be tortillas, atole, tamales, cotton thread, herbs, maybe a few vegetables, maybe prepared stew, perhaps some small crafted thing made in the household. She is not the whole market, of course. No one person could be, but she is exactly the kind of person without whom the market could never have become what it was. The route is cool at first, breath visible, reed mats rolled, canoes nudging quietly. The city does not so much wake as accumulate consciousness. Footsteps multiply. The smell of wet earth mixes with charcoal smoke and the faint sweetness of cacao from somewhere ahead. A dog noses refuse. Water laps softly against retaining edges. Cloth rubs against cloth. Teyakapan adjusts the tump line, that practical band taking weight across the forehead, and keeps walking. Have you ever felt how a city begins in the feet, before it begins in the eyes. Have you ever sensed that commerce is first a bodily act, long before it becomes an abstract one? The Nahuatl word tianquistli means market, and from that same root comes the sound behind words still alive in Mexico today. It is a lovely word for such a bustling thing, because it reminds us that markets are not only about money, they are about meeting, arranging, displaying, being seen, being judged, being needed. Each kind of merchandise, one observer noted, had its fixed place. Order mattered, regulation mattered, buildings housed magistrates, executive officers inspected goods. Even in noise there was structure. Empires love categories, but markets reveal what people actually touch. And touch is everywhere here. Cotton hanks soft in the hand, goose quills holding grains of gold so the metal can be seen through white shafts, rough pottery rims, rabbit fur, feather bundles, coarse maguey fiber, clay cups still warm from freshly poured drink. The market could draw perhaps 20,000 to 40,000 people on an ordinary day, with some estimates swelling to 60,000 on the special market day of the 5-day cycle. Hernán Cortés himself claimed 60,000 vendors, almost certainly an astonished exaggeration, but exaggeration tells you something too. Magnitude overwhelmed him. Now the sounds rise. A murmur more than a league off, one chronicler said, though perhaps memory enlarged the scene. Still, you can believe the hum, voices calling quantities, bargaining phrases, laughter, complaint, the flat tap of sandals, the slosh of water, the rustle of maize leaves wrapped around tamales. Someone sneezes, someone coughs. Somewhere a child whines for a sweet. Somewhere a seller rearranges herbs, releasing bitter green perfume into the air. Somewhere an atelier seller lifts a lid, and a cloud of thick, comforting steam washes her face. Women's market rolls were extensive. They sold feathers, roots, medicinal herbs, vegetables, cooked stews, maize and egg tortillas, atole, tamales, chocolate, and cotton hanks for embroidery. They healed inflammations, fevers, fractures. They told fortunes with maize kernels and cords. They worked as matchmakers, midwives, priestesses, weavers, painters for ritual dances. The categories blur because life blurs them. A woman who ground maize in the dark could also sell food by daylight. A woman who wove for family could also weave for tribute or exchange. A woman who tended a child might also read the market's needs more shrewdly than any magistrate. And textiles. Textiles. Here the scale startles. Records suggest the imperial center received annual tribute that included more than 2,076,000 cotton capes, 240,000 agave fiber capes, 240,000 skirts and huipiles, and 144,000 loincloths, along with over 101,000 kilograms of cotton. Numbers like these are almost too large to feel, so let us make them human. Every thread passed through fingers, every garment demanded time, every bale concealed hours of posture, eye strain, repetitive motion, and patient skill. A fabric is just fatigue made beautiful. Perhaps Tenochtitlan carries not finished cloth but spun fiber, or perhaps she has woven something small, the backstrap loom, anchored to a post or tree and to the weaver's own body, turns the torso into part of the machine. What a quiet truth that is. To make cloth, the body itself must become tension. Think about that next time you pull on a shirt without a second thought, or fold laundry while half distracted, or order fabric with one tap from a glowing screen. The ease of modern life is often just distance from the labor we no longer have to see. Taste lives here too. A sip of atole, thick and slightly sweet, a pinch of chili on the tongue, the deep bitterness of cacao for those who could afford it, the salty tang of sweat already drying on the upper lip, though the day has barely begun. Light changes while all this happens. Blue becomes silver. Silver becomes pale gold on lake water and plaster walls. Feathers brighten. Skin tones warm. What looked like shadow takes on texture. The market, like a flower, opens by degree. And here, as gently as we can, we should remember that Aztec markets also sold enslaved people. Human beings were counted among goods. One old valuation even estimated a man who wagered his life and lost at a game at the worth of 20 capes. It is a terrible, useful number. Terrible because it compresses a life into exchange. Useful because it keeps us from romanticizing the scene too completely. Every sophisticated society arranges beauty beside brutality. Jokes are often just complaints wearing makeup, and markets are often morality arranged in rows. Still, Tenochtitlan adjusts her place, pause, trades, watches, listens. Maybe she knows exactly which customers arrive first, and which haggle hardest. Maybe she notices the magistrates from the corner of her eye. Maybe she has been doing this long enough that her hands continue moving, while her mind drifts to the household left behind. Did the child finish the tortilla? Did the daughter remember to sweep? Did the fire catch properly? Human attention has always been divided by care. Near the end of this morning, what lingers is not merely the scale of commerce, but the quiet miracle of coordination. Before sunrise, water had to be fetched, fires coaxed, dough prepared, bundles tied, babies nursed, floors swept, herbs gathered, bodies washed, goods loaded, routes taken. A market that dazzled Spaniards by daylight began in darkness under the supervision of women few chronicles bothered to name. Memory is unfair that way, but sleep, perhaps, lets us restore a little balance. And once you feel how much of an empire was already moving before breakfast, you begin to see that dawn itself, in that world, had a woman's face. What stays with me now is not one grand image, but a sequence of smaller ones, each glowing softly at the edge of understanding. Soko bent over the metatl while the room is still grey, stone whispering against stone, her palms flattening tlaxcali that will vanish almost as soon as they are made. Malinol breathing inside the temescal, herbs and steam gathering around her, the midwife's hands steady enough to lend steadiness to another body, Tenochtitlan shifting her basket strap in the cool half-light, walking toward a market so large its murmur could seem to arrive before the people themselves. A woman at a vat, a mother near a hearth, a cellar on a causeway, a body in steam, a hand in dough, a city waiting. The thing that moves me most when I think about this is how much of history depends on work performed in advance of recognition. Before applause, there is preparation. Before daylight, there is labor. Before the public story, there is the private action that makes the public story possible. We inherit empires as names and maps, but the people inside them inherited mornings. They inherited tasks. They inherited expectations tied to basket, broom, spindle, comel, child, bundle, breath. And still, within all that structure, they must have laughed sometimes, and sighed, and resented, and loved, and noticed beauty in the ordinary way human beings always do. By 1519, perhaps 200,000 or more people lived in Tenochtitlan and Tlatelolco together, and across central Mexico, millions more belonged to the tributary world, shaped by Mexica power. Yet whether a city holds hundreds or hundreds of thousands, every day still begins at the scale of the body, a shoulder lifting weight, a hand touching water, a knee finding the floor, an exhale before effort. That continuity comforts me. It narrows the frightening distance between then and now. The centuries are real, yes, but they are not absolute. A mother warming food while someone else still sleeps is a bridge across time. A tired person beginning necessary work in the dark is a bridge across time. Hunger, care, repetition, endurance. These are old companions of our species. If there is a universal theme here, maybe it is this: the inner life persists even under duty. No system, however powerful, fully erases the private sensation of warm steam on skin, of dough cooling the fingertips, of morning air against the face on the way to market. The state counts tribute. The temple counts rituals. The chronicler counts crowds. But the human soul counts other things: relief, worry, tenderness, irritation, pride, the little flicker of satisfaction when a tortilla lands just right, when a child eats, when a bundle sells, when a pain eases. The world is held together not only by systems, but by unrecorded moments of competence. Thank you truly for spending this time with me, and for lending your quiet attention to women whose mornings helped feed, soothe, organize, and animate an entire civilization. If you'd like, tell me in the comments which detail stayed with you most: the sound of stone grinding before dawn, the heat of the temescal, the walk toward the market, or the tiny basket, broom, and spindle waiting beside a newborn girl. And if this soft kind of history is something you'd like more of, you can leave a gentle like and subscribe. No pressure. just if you want to wander back here again. Next time, we might drift into another old world at another impossible hour and listen for the small sound that everyone else forgot to call important. But for now, let the market murmur fade, let the steam soften, let the smell of maize and smoke grow faint, let the cool air above Lake Texcoco blur into darkness, let the stone grow still beneath resting hands, let the causeways empty, let the hearth quiet, let the shoulders drop, let the jaw loosen, let the brow soften, let the last little thoughts dim one by one, and may you have a warm, peaceful, deeply restful good night.